Hello.
Hi. I'm John Leister.
I'm Paul Bale.
And this is
The Canadian Bro Show.
Episode 7.
Episode 7. All things Canadian.
Eh?
With Pauly and Johnny.
How's it going, eh?
It's
Take
going,
off, eh?
It's going pretty good, eh?
Said it with love.
Ya hoser. So, here we are. Today, we had a really nice episode. We just finished episode 6 and health and well-being, and Johnny and I have been talking about this for a couple of weeks. And
I feel much healthier now.
well, you look healthier.
Thank you. As do you.
And because we are healthier because of what we're doing. But today's show, we want to talk about other ways to enhance one's vessel, body, soul, and mind. And that is education,
Reading.
entertainment, reading and writing.
Brain exercise.
Brain exercise. As Johnny is a prolific writer.
Thank you.
And one of our main efforts and goals in the Canadian Bro Show is to get Johnny a literary
A
agent.
Netflix deal.
Baby steps. Start off with a screenplay or a pilot for a television show.
Anybody looking for content?
Retro, mid-70s.
I've
Lee
got tons of it.
Hacklin
Yeah.
is his name.
Thank you.
And solving crimes is his game. And he looks like
Jan Michael Vincent.
Jan Michael Vincent. Now, for
Who
those
was in,
that don't
who was
remember,
a very popular actor from the 1970s.
very,
Airwolf,
very handsome dude.
Damnation Alley.
Saw that in the Stanley
One of our
Theater.
favorite movies.
We talked about it.
Yeah.
And very handsome dude was on fire in his early stages.
He was
his
one of those
career.
actors who was ridiculously handsome,
Yeah.
but could also be a tough guy.
Yeah.
And that's the image that I have for my character.
Kind of
Someone
like
who's
Chuck Norris.
Someone who's underestimated by the bad guys because he's so good looking.
Well, he
Very
was,
often a bad guy will refer to Lee as pretty boy,
yeah,
and that triggers him into
yeah, it's-
kickassery.
yeah. But I mean, Johnny's Lee Hacklin he's written over 100 books, and they're shorter books, but
Yeah, short stories.
He writes every day. He's disciplined and he's
my
dedicated.
bless.
And I've read a lot of his stuff.
Thank you.
And I really enjoy Lee Hacklin. I think
Thanks
it's
so much.
I think it's perfect for a television show in a pilot initially.
Too. But I'm biased.
A mid-70s, a guy that looks like Jan Michael Vincent, who's a very rugged, handsome-looking blonde guy with the perfect features and everything. Much
Quentin Tarantino's watching. Mr.
much like a
Tarantino.
combination
Got
between
the
Johnny and I, taking the best of both of us, and you got Lee Hacklin,
There you go.
basically. A little bit more leaning towards myself because I'm more of a leading man than a character actor at this stage of my lack of career.
Okay.
I'm just completely rambling.
We're not lacking for self-confidence.
No, it's just
Not
we're
an
just
issue.
it's just flapping of the wind. You know, usually I leave that for Johnny, but occasionally I flap on those. When you got lips like this, you flap in the wind occasionally. But today,
Your lips, my feet.
oh my God, if you've seen this guy's feet,
They're quite wide.
there's a Dr. Dre song in the Chronic, the album, and it starts off, your face looks like AC green, your feet are like Biverines. And if you saw AC Green, he used to be a great player with the LA Lakers, he had a face that a mother could love, and Jerry curls, and he was about 6'7", and his face looked like the front of a 18-wheel Mack truck. And
Aw.
they were just mocking him because he was a virgin,
Okay.
probably the only virgin in the NBA. You know, when you're a multi-million-dollar athlete in professional basketball, you don't
Not
think...
exactly hurting for dates.
No, that would not be an issue. But of course, anyways, it was just a funny song. And when I saw Johnny's feet, I was like, what the heck is a bivarine? Apparently, it's like a small vessel that they use when they're doing landings when you're invading another country. But I don't know. I could be wrong. So today, let's
Favorite
talk
authors.
and because Johnny's a writer, let's start with Johnny. Johnny, who is your... Now, this is in no particular order.
No.
We're just kind of, so who do you really...
I'm going to start with a very controversial figure. This is a woman who is loved and hated, and you know you've made your mark in the world when people hate you, when you dare to be yourself. Her name is Ayn Rand.
I thought you were going to say Madonna.
And she, well, maybe when we do another music episode. Ayn Rand was a Russian woman who emigrated to the U.S., I want to say around the 1920s. She worked for Cecil B. DeMille, the legendary film director,
Absolutely.
as I guess as an extra and as a seamstress.
Back in the 20s, 30s,
But
40s.
she always wanted to be a writer, and she wrote 2 amazing books called The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. And just a little bit the story of Atlas Shrugged. You know how in a strike it's always blue-collar people that go on strike?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Atlas Shrugged, all the smartest people, all the most creative and productive people say, you know what? We don't want to be part of this hyper-taxation society. We don't want to be slaves. And it's a bit like Star Trek. They go off and they form like a utopian society. And meanwhile, the rest of the world falls into like a global depression.
Right.
It's a great story. It's very black hat, white hat, like good and evil, but I like those kinds of stories. And it's very thought-provoking. Now, Ayn Rand was an atheist, and of course, I am the exact opposite of an atheist. I believe in God 100%.
At this stage
but
of his
that
life.
does not that did not in any way detract my pleasure for reading these books. And The Fountainhead is about architecture, and so that's my choice, Ayn Rand. Her books are really thick. They're like 1,000 pages, and they are very intellectually stimulating and entertaining at the same time.
Very nice choice. And I'm aware of her writing. It wasn't my vibe, but I did try to get into Tolstoy, who also had books like this. And just
War and Peace.
I mean, as an example, that was the
Classics.
first one. Try to get through that. I did. It took me a year, part-time, but I think it's a really good choice, and I wouldn't have expected that from you. And I was really kind of curious what Johnny's were, because, I mean, I also write, not as prolific or not even close, but I enjoy writing. I found it therapeutic. I used to write when I played professional basketball in Europe.
Like autobiographical stuff?
No, not yet, although I am working on a screenplay.
You should do that.
But I used to write called Hollywood Hoopster, and because of my love of basketball, I was in Europe, and I was in the BBL, in the British Basketball League, and they have like 4 channels on TV, and they had satellite, but it depends on the team and if they're going to give you. So I was bored, and I was working out all the time, so I wanted to do something. So I thought I'd write an article. About basketball called Hollywood Hoopster. And the reason why I called it Hollywood is because I used to be an actor and model, and I've been in film and television and commercials and
theater. Have you posted that stuff online?
I haven't. I did. I did, actually. But I did it in Europe when I was playing professional basketball, and that was 25 years ago. But when I came back and I met my wife and we moved back to Vancouver, she got a job as the editor for the only Italian newspaper in Vancouver at the time called Marco Polo.
Oh, wow.
And Marco Polo. And she said, do you want to continue to write your thing, and we can just do it on Italian basketball? And so I was like, cool. How much are you going to pay me? And it wasn't much, but it wasn't much in the UK either. I think it was £25 a week, which was $75 Canadian, which is not bad, I guess, for one article. But I did write for Marco Polo on Italian basketball.
So you're a professional writer.
Well, I was for
a
brief time. Yeah, I didn't. I really wanted to save the. This is about getting Johnny, as I mentioned in previous episodes. This is episode 7, by the way. So thank you for joining. I want to get Johnny. I want to get him a literary agent, and if I can't find him, I'm going to be his literary agent eventually.
You got the gig.
And I'm gonna
50%.
We're gonna do whatever I can. 50%. I got video evidence of that. This is 50% is outrageous. It should be only 10, 15 max.
No, I said 15. 1-5.
Oh, I thought you said 50. I think he's changing his mind already. Okay, we're gonna have this another episode.
And beer will always be on me.
But so getting back to my favorite, I'm just gonna go back to all of my everything I've read growing up. And
we're voracious readers. We love to read.
Absolutely. I can't spell it. I can say it. I love the word.
I usually have 3 or 4 books going at the same time.
Johnny and I, we grew up in a time where TV was 3 or 4 channels, and it was going to a movie or reading a book, go to the library, read books, and that's what we did, or comics.
Right.
And that's what we did. That's what we did. And it was, and thank God we had that.
I never feel like I'm wasting time when I'm reading.
No.
I feel like I'm doing something, and then I'm also learning while I'm reading,
Absolutely.
even if it's something that's just meant to be entertaining.
Absolutely. And that's what we're trying to do with the Canadian Bro Show is we're trying to be entertaining. We're not always going to be successful in that, but we want to be able to provide new content, fresh content for every episode, and offer the audience a broad range of topics that we enjoy.
Right.
And then, of course, if you like something that we haven't brought up, please feel free to mention.
We're open to all ideas.
Positive, negative,
and
suggest.
hopefully we're inspiring other people.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I feel like,
I mean, that's the idea. We just wanted to have some fun. We wanted to, we have friendship at 52 years. We still like each other. We still care about each other. We have a lot of similar things that are going on in our life. We both take care of ourselves. We both work out every day. We both care about our careers. And we're excited about that. We do love life. And I think you should too. And if you don't, maybe this is going to help you.
It all goes by very quickly, so we got to do.
And it speeds up as you get older. It speeds up,
and which is also motivating. So, what's your choice?
Well, I'm going to go back to a childhood. I started to read J.R.R. Tolkien.
Good choice.
The Lord of the Rings, the trilogy. I've read it a dozen times, and then all the Hobbit. Read those, and seen all the movies and everything else. I was captivated. That books were thick, and I could literally disappear for a weekend and just read all three of them in one go and go, wow.
Very uplifting.
And then to see what they did on the film version with Peter Jackson is unbelievable.
Right up until the last half hour of Return of the King.
Yeah.
The movie. Wow. That's my only... I say this criticism lovingly,
Yeah.
but holy moly. I remember sitting in a theater and people were putting on their jackets and then sitting down.
Yeah.
Putting on their jackets.
I didn't know why. That was crazy.
When is this movie going to end? It's great, but it's got to end eventually. It's like a 9-hour movie.
I was like, shh, sit down. We're not finished. It's like... Good point, though. And that would have to be my first one I remember. Johnny, what would be your next one?
Okay, I'm going to go with Tom Clancy. The legendary techno-thriller writer, and what's really inspiring to me about his story is that he didn't publish his first book until he was 45 years old. He was an insurance salesman. He wanted to get into the military. I think that they would not accept him because of his eyesight. And his first novel was The Hunt for Red October. I actually saw the movie with my dad before reading the book. Now, the first time I tried to read this book, I couldn't finish it. There was just way too much techno jargon, but then I picked it up again a couple years later, and subsequently I've read all of his books.
Tom Clancy has a little bit overkill.
He'll go for like 9 pages on a tank,
on a rifle.
He'll explain every single part
on a rifle,
and where it came from, and who designed it, and how it was modified. But if you do slog through all that stuff, it does pay off. Like 1,000 pages later.
If anybody could explain what a grease gun is, Tom Clancy.
He was like, that's one of my, I don't want to say weakness, but I'm not really very big on research. I prefer to use my imagination. He was the king of research. And I think he was even like called in to testify at Congress because they were like, how is it that you know all of this stuff? Like, we're a little nervous that you're publishing what we consider to be military secrets. And he was like, hey, I just went to the library and it was all there.
Well, and earlier, when he was younger, he wanted to be a police officer. He wanted to be a private investigator, but he didn't have the capacity, and that's why he was a late bloomer. And Johnny and I know everything about being late bloomers. We're doing this because we're late bloomers.
Better late than never.
We should have done this 25, 30 years ago.
Here we are now.
But YouTube wasn't there, so, it's
And of course,
timing.
since Tom Clancy passed away, many other writers are continuing the series, and that's when you know that you created something that there's like a constant hunger and appetite for. So
which is going to be one of my future, when I talk about one of my authors, the same thing happened. So it's a very good point.
Yeah.
And it does happen. That's a good choice. I love Clancy stuff.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do. I like him. I do. I tried to read him, but it was a little bit too much. I like different types of
Dead
his
of
genre.
Honor ends in the most amazing cliffhanger.
But getting back to Clancy, I got into, I'm a gamer. So my PlayStation 1, I bought a bunch of Clancy, and I get lost in it.
Games,
and Xbox, and
Rainbow Six. Is that
yeah, that's one of them. It's awesome, and Battlefield and all those. They're really good, and that's a good choice. Clancy's really good, and my next one, I'm going to go into more of a satirical, American satirical vibe. When I met my wife in South Beach, in Florida, after I retired from basketball in Europe. I used to rollerblade every day on South Beach to start the day, and then I go to Starbucks and get my coffee and take my blades off and go to the beach and check out the beach activity and see if there's any man of wars floating by to sting someone or a shark close by, or just looking at all the beautiful people.
Shark seeing.
In South Beach. And there's a lot of beautiful people in South Beach. If you've never been to South Beach in South Florida and Miami Beach, it's incredible. I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was incredible. And I found myself riveted on a writer from Florida, and his name was Carl Hysen. And I've read every single one of his books, and he's prolific. He's done a lot, but he's
He
just
writes crime fiction, right?
crime
Like
fiction.
Elmore Leonard.
Yes.
Style, but satirical.
Yes.
Tongue in cheek.
Totally.
Like lots of humor, right?
And so that's what I love about Johnny. He knows I love Elmore Rent. I was going to say Elmore, but I like Carl Hysen better because Elmore is very similar, but Carl Hysen's just a little bit different bent, a little bit more satirical.
Right.
His characterization, the characters he created are just one of a kind, you know.
Does he have like a main character that continues from book to book, or are they self-contained?
They're pretty yes and no.
Oh, I see.
So
Does
you
he
have to
overlap?
read, you have to read a whole bunch of his stuff,
Right.
but he's got main characters that come through a lot of his different books
Okay.
at different times,
Yeah,
and
I
he
see.
brings them back.
That's cool.
That's a great question, though. But Carl Hysen, if you haven't read any of his stuff, a couple of them have gone to movies. Vince Vaughn was in Bad Monkey. Demi Moore was in Striptease.
Okay.
Demi Moore's 65 now. I saw her recently. My goodness. If talk about our last episode, health and well-being.
Right.
Whatever she's doing, copy her because my goodness, 65 and
Hard
she
to
looks.
believe.
It's really incredible. But anyways, Carl Hysen, Johnny, who's your
Good
next?
choice. Okay,
Thank
I'm going to go with Stephen King. Now, Pauly and I did an episode on comic books. It was our second or third episode. And so when I was a boy, when I started reading novels, I want to say that Stephen King was probably the first hardcore novelist where I would read one, and then as soon as, like, whether it was Carrie, and then The Dead Zone, and then Cujo, and then The Stand, like, it was like almost like I had to get, as soon as the book came out on the shelf, I would ask my mom to buy it for me, or I'd buy it for myself with my allowance.
Yeah.
And of course, Stephen King is famous for being a horror writer, but I never really saw his stories that way. I saw them as stories about good versus evil. And I love them so much because his heroes, well, he's sort of everyday, kind of everyman kind of characters, so three-dimensional, so believable, and so engaging, and you really care about them. And so when these horrible things happen, you know, that you're hooked, right?
Yeah.
And of course, Carrie, his first novel, according to the story, he was a school teacher at the time, and he finished Carrie, and then he threw it in the garbage. And his wife fished it out, and she read it and said, "Honey, what are you doing? You're a fool. This is a great book." And so he took it to the publisher, and like a year later, Carrie the movie was made.
He actually threw it in the.
He threw with that, according to legend. I read his book on. He wrote a book called
and by the way, he's not married to that wife anymore, but she saved his career.
He wrote a book called On Writing, which was sort of his autobiography. And anyone who wants to be a writer, I highly recommend this book. A lot of great tips about writing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he did tell us.
And that book I gave you on writing.
Story by Robert McKee.
Have you read it
which
yet?
I am reading. Yes, it's definitely a lot of food for thought.
If Johnny just finishes that thing and does the screenplay or the pilot for Lee Hacklin, done deal. Because it'll make my job easier if I'm his agent. But I'd rather get a referral for being his agent and get someone that's better than I am.
Were you a Stephen King reader back
Yes.
in the day? The Dead Zone.
It's on my list.
Such a great book, right?
Stephen King's on my list. So with Johnny and I being the same age and growing up a block from each other and kids, we're gonna have a lot of the same things. And so Stephen King, obviously one of mine. But I did that. I've got 14, just in case. So I love Stephen King, and I totally agree with that pick, and that's a really good pick.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to my old school days when I was really young and in the 70s, because that's when I was really voracious. That's when I really started to fall in love with reading and getting lost in that reading world. And one of my favorite was the great Agatha Christie.
Wow.
And I just thank you. And
Hercule Poirot.
Oh, what a great character! I mean, you know, if you've ever not liked a certain culture, and if there was one character that stood out in a way that represented that culture in so many different ways, positive, negative, I won't even try to enunciate. Mr. Poirot.
Peter Ustinov played him in that movie, in the Murder on the Orient Express.
Just incredible. Well, I mean, that was one of the movies, Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile. I mean, she was prolific. She had over 50 novels.
Right.
She wrote songs.
Murder mysteries.
Everything. But a
Were
lot
you always
of...
surprised at the reveal of the killer?
I honestly could never guess most of them. And I still haven't even seen the modern ones. But to this day, as a kid...
Kenneth Branagh directed the most recent one.
I love Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
He did a lot of Shakespeare stuff, which will be in my list later. But Johnny, who's your next?
Warning. Okay, I'm going to go with a name that just popped into my head. It's not on my list, so I'm just going to wing this.
Whoa.
I'm going to go with Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith is a writer, director, and actor from New Jersey who actually attended Vancouver Film School in the early 90s, dropped out after 6 months, went back to New Jersey, maxed out a bunch of credit cards, and wrote and financed a movie called Clerks, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. And I love the way Kevin Smith writes. He just very a lot of pop culture references, and he writes characters that are very relatable. I mean, Clerks, have you seen that movie?
Yes.
It's about a couple of...
I've seen Clerks 1 and 2.
Yeah, they're both hilarious.
Yeah.
And again, Clerks is like one of the first movies I ever saw where I saw myself as the main character.
Me too.
Like, there's a guy in his early 20s.
That's what Kevin Smith did. He
He's
was
just
able to bring a
working,
regular
you know,
joke. Someone hanging out at 7-Eleven.
Right, and talking about Star Wars all
Right?
day.
It's selling little grams so they can get Slurpee money.
And just being able to relate to these guys who are obviously very smart and very creative, but they don't believe in themselves. And they know that they can do better. They have that self-knowledge, and it's driving them crazy.
They were
right?
on the fringes of society.
Yeah.
Nobody believed them. They didn't know why they were here.
And also, just to get back to health and fitness, Kevin Smith almost died from a heart attack.
Yeah.
And after that experience, he lost something like 120 pounds. Have you seen recent pictures of him?
Yeah.
Like, he's super svelte now.
Well, he actually put it back on.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit because he's touring right now as a musician. But what a talented dude.
So that's my choice. I like his writing. He always makes me laugh. I mean,
it's pretty
again,
funny.
Clerks and Clerks 2.
Great characterization of the people that he created as well, right? That's a really good call, and that's a nice off the cuff one. I'm going to go back to because you took Stephen King. I'm going to go back to.
Sorry.
No, it's all good, and that's okay. I mean, Stephen King's one of the most popular American novelists in the history of mankind,
Right. And super prolific.
Very.
He writes like 2 or 3 books a year.
And I love being prolific because I was prolific in so many different ways in my life, and it's because I was driven to be prolific. I didn't know anything else, and before I found basketball, I was into theater and film, and writing and reading, and acting. And Johnny and I, we had the same drama teacher in high school, Dr. Don Wilson.
A very colorful character.
Very colorful, and very flamboyant.
Very encouraging. He was very encouraging.
Very talented, very nice guy.
Yeah, he was.
And I took his acting class 5 years, from grade 8 to grade 12.
Wow.
And Johnny and I were in 2 classes together, I believe. And we were both there, and we both lived with each other. And he was a PhD in theater. He actually was a serious
My mom and dad
actor.
thought it was hilarious that he insisted upon being called doctor.
Oh, I know. Well, he was an actual doctorate and a PhD.
A little status anxiety, I think.
Yeah, and he had the worst coffee breath I've ever experienced in my life. And he wore nylon pants, stretchy nylon pants.
Wow, you have a good memory.
Yeah, and between his breath and his nylon pants, and he also had floods. His floods were like, he was... anyways, he was just I loved the guy.
What are floods? Are they like platform shoes?
No, it's where you pull your pants up really high, and it's like you can see your socks and your calves, and it just looks awkward, right? And everything's all jammed up, and it's just uncomfortable. And you're sitting at your desk, and you're trying to focus on Shakespeare or Bernhard Brecht or whatever. And he comes by with his coffee breath and his pants jammed up to his moobs.
That's a sign of intelligence when people are not overly
sign
concerned over their sartorial appearance.
Yeah. Anyways,
Albert Einstein.
he was brilliant and talented, and
He was not boring.
yeah, not a great actor,
Oh, really?
but he loved
I
it.
saw him act.
Yeah, he was a great teacher.
He had a passion for theater.
So I'm going to go with William Shakespeare because of Dr. Don Wilson, in memory of Dr. Don Wilson. Shakespeare is just, I've read so much of his stuff, and when I was younger, I had a really hard time reading it because it's very old English.
I've never, no disrespect intended, obviously one of the greatest writers of all time.
Oh, yeah.
But I never, to this day, have not acquired, I try every so often.
Just incredible.
It's just too hard for me.
Yeah, incredible. Well, you think it's too hard reading it?
Me and thou.
Try to be an actor and act his writing. Oh.
But I've enjoyed some of the movies based on...
But I mean,
like Henry V is a great movie.
Henry V, I got Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, Julius Caesar, Macbeth. I mean, you can go on and on and on.
Have you seen Ron, that Japanese movie?
Yes.
That's based on King Lear?
Yes.
That's one of my all-time favorite movies.
Well, that's
Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah, that's another writer that was almost on the list, but I chose William Shakespeare. Akira Kurosawa is a legend. But anyway.
He wrote The Hidden Fortress, which was the wellspring of Star Wars. If you watch the first few minutes of Hidden Fortress, there's like 2 guys wandering through the desert bemoaning their lot in life. And it's just like like C-3PO and R2-D2. One of them actually says, we seem to be made to suffer.
So when Johnny and I were living a block from each other in Kitsilano, we used to go to Videomanica
Oh, great video store.
instead of
Legendary
Blockbuster.
video
And
store.
I just would go from the letter A to the letter Z. And
Yeah,
I
they
watched
just had
every
the
tape.
craziest selection of
Every
movies.
tape in the
Every
entire
movie ever
store.
made.
People would walk in, they go, Paul, how many today? I grabbed 6, 7, 8 VHSs and watch all of them in the week and then return them and do them all over again. That's how we are. We're crazy. But Johnny, who do you got next?
Okay, I'm going to go with Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, my goodness.
I think he's a very underrated writer. Of course, he wrote the original Rocky, and according to legend, the studio offered him like $300,000, which is still a lot of money by today's standards. But back then it was
1979?
back then it was like $10 million.
Yeah.
They offered him that much money for the script, but not to star in Rocky. They wanted one of the big stars at the time, like Ryan O'Neal or Burt Reynolds. He's like, no, if you want the script, you have to have me in it. I love Sylvester Stallone's writing. I mean, it's not always great. I wouldn't say The Expendables is one of his better examples writing-wise. I still enjoyed the movie. But again, just that character that he created, Rocky, just such an epitome type of character of someone who's a self-believer and is going for it. When he steps into the ring, there's no guarantee that he's going to win the fight. But the point is that he actually does it. He actually puts his life and limb on line just to prove to himself that he can do it. And so that's my choice, Sylvester Stallone.
Love it.
I just think he's a really underrated writer.
He's an underrated writer, very talented, very prolific, and to this day is still doing it. And
Yeah.
I love him, and I love the Rocky series, especially number 1. That was just incredible.
And what a great sense of humor,
Yeah.
right?
And he's a fighter. And a lot of people don't realize that when Johnny talks about it, he still doesn't own the rights to...
Yeah, they're doing an
All
Ivan
the-
Drago movie. He's pretty not very happy about that.
No, he doesn't own the rights
You can
because
blame him.
the
But that's showbiz.
the producer was a typical LA producer, and he had no choice. But it's not like he hasn't done well for himself. He's a multi
He's a great example of the benefits of self. What was that?
Attention. A fire alarm signal has been found on the parkade floor. Please stand by for further instructions.
Wow.
Attention. A fire alarm signal has been found on
If this
the
was a real
parkade
emergency,
floor.
we'd all be dead.
Please stand
No.
by for further instructions.
So
It's like a police scanner.
I can tell you, we actually
about that.
put this in the video because we wanted to change things up a little bit and make it a little bit more dramatic.
Exactly. It's all planned.
Yeah, this is not something we planned at all, but I can tell you exactly what's happening. And Johnny being a security guy,
Having a fire alarm of all things.
yeah,
We just muddle through. We just pretend.
no, you know who it is. You know
might
what is
kick
going
us
on.
out, though.
Unfortunately, it's the street elements down there partaking in a little bit of illicit activity on the
Turn
side.
the volume down. No?
We're just going to barrel through this.
Okay.
Or
It's our theme song.
Maybe we should just stop it.
This is annoying.
I think we'll just stop it for a sec because it's probably just going to be fake.
Of all
Or maybe
things.
not.
We can turn the volume down. No? Oh, it's coming from outside, Paul.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Anyways,
Talk about bad luck.
no, it's okay. We'll just stop it.